Welcome to Just Lyrics with Melanie Jones. Today's guest is Jake Michael, who's been performing for millions of years, been writing lyrics for millions of years, and has performed everywhere. Because I don't believe introductions, I'm just going to start with a question. Are you ready, Jake?
Hmm.
When you were 5 years old, what sort of music did you hear?
All right. So my parents are both from a small town in Indiana, and my dad's family did they sang in church, and they were some of them were very good singers. My mom's family did more like traditional folk music, especially my great grandpa Brown, and he used to play music with like hobos down by the railroad tracks, and
There must be a
so
song in there somewhere.
pardon.
There must be a song in there somewhere.
Actually, I did write a song about that. But there's uh, so I had that, and then I had, but I grew up in New Jersey in Pennsauken, which is just outside of Philadelphia, and so my sisters were into this book. They were like 5 or 6 years older than me, called the Fireside Book of Folk Songs. And so then I learned like green grow the rushes, ho, what is your one, ho, one is one and all along it. And like that's how am I. So all like these kind of uh, folk music things like Pete Seeger and his communist friends would listen to. But then I'm also in Pennsauken, which is just outside of Camden. And so I mean I just remember like really being aware of like watching the Flip Wilson show, and he'd have musicians on the Flip Wilson show, and like, wouldn't you like to fly in my beautiful balloon? Which I think for a kid, I could sort of, yeah, and then I was also aware of um, the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel. And my parents, they didn't listen to popular music or jazz or anything. My dad listened to classical, but like I came up with this theory that the Beatles all were a group because they all had the same haircut. So the same haircut was what got them together. And like the Temptations, they were just, in my world, it was a segregated neighborhood. They were four tall black men. So that was like they were the only ones in the world, and they all got together and said, "Hey, we should form a group," because they had this thing in common. And then Simon and Garfunkel, I couldn't figure out why they were together. So I figured they had the exact same voice. So I had this awareness of like pop music, and I just sort of tried to make sense of it.
My first awareness of the Beatles, I would hear kids, I must have been in first grade. Kids are talking about the Beatles, and I'm like, why are people making such a big deal about a group of bugs?
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of the mind of a child.
Right, right. So, what was the first song that you wrote that made you think you could be a songwriter?
When I was in college, I was writing songs in high school, and they were, teenage angst, blah 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 blah, sort of goofball philosophy things. But when I was in college, I wrote a song called "Dear Eddie." It goes, "Dear Eddie, how are things at college? I don't have to work today. I got the whole day free. It's nice you've got a girlfriend. She sure sounds nice to me." And it was basically, we were all getting letters from our mom, and we're like college freshman guys who were like, "Hey, we're going to be doing all kinds of stuff," but we're still getting letters from our moms and phone calls from our moms, and everybody was getting them. And so it was just like this. I took all the letters, and that was just a kind of a musical letter from your mom to a guy in college, and uh, that was a song that I had never heard anyone do that before. So this was just kind of a completely, like, I had finally written an original song rather than just rewriting as a teenager, rewriting everybody else's song. So
That's, so, what year are we talking? around?
80, I think I was class of 86. No, I was class of 82. And yeah, so this would have been it would have been in the 80s. The new wave, post-punk new wave.
Yeah. So let's go back a bit. Let's pretend, because you would have been too little, but let's pretend it's 1964
Right.
and you want a job in the Brill building. Why should they hire you?
Well, the Brill Building is where all the hit makers went to. I think Steely Dan actually might have worked they might have been one of the last few people to actually work in the Brill Building. Um, I, I, so here's my pitch: is I can write in a wide variety of styles. So if you have a country musician, I'm familiar enough with country music. If you have like a soul, I grew up outside of Camden. I grew up listening to Motown, and if you have just regular old pop, I grew up listening to the pop music on the radio. So I can do all kinds of styles, and I can write. And my lyrics are I I try to make them so that I come up with unique rhymes. So it's not just I see the stars above, bop 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 bop, love. It's always it's not always going to be love and above and true and you, and that I can come up with some unique hooks, which is important to songwriting. Especially if it's a pop song, that I've come up with hooks. And I've actually had people tell me that even when I'm writing a song that I sort of feel is like a serious song, they're like, oh, that's got a good hook. So I seem to be, which is kind of a marketing thing. So hire me, Mr. Brill, damn it.
So stepping out of the Mr. Brill role, do you have any formal training? Because you do have an amazing capacity for different genres. Or is it just, are you
No,
self-taught?
no. I mean, I took guitar lessons early on. I never learned to read music. I'm dyslexic, and I have difficulties telling time, let alone reading sheet music. But yeah, that's weird. I hadn't thought about that, because what's strange about it is I come from a very literary family, but I'm not all that well read, believe it or not, just because I have I read very slowly. And I say I can write quicker than I can read. But I kind of wonder whether it's because with lyric writing, it's not a long form. So I don't have to, it's not like writing a paper. And writing a paper, I make so many spelling mistakes and everything takes a long time. But it's a short thing. And because I couldn't spell, I'd often have to come up with alternative words. I would just, instead of ameliorate, I'd come up with a shorter word and that I could spell. And I think so I just kind of got trained into replacing words and rephrasing things. And that's probably served me well. But that is kind of interesting, because I was always like into science and stuff, while my sisters and my father were more writing. Yeah, so
I think you see a lot of people with some sort of, I hate to say disability, but or some sort of challenge
yep,
that are very creative.
yeah,
And it's actually enhances the creative process
yeah,
if you use it in that direction. So
yeah.
that's really awesome. So can you give an example of a song you wrote with a strong narrative element?
A lot of people don't write in that style, and I think that sort of the folk music and even like bluegrassy stuff when we used to drive to Indiana, we used to sometimes go through West Virginia, and back in 1967 and 68, you could still hear bluegrass on the radio stations in like West Virginia, and those tend to be ballads, story songs. So I've got I got a couple songs. I got this one, Logan County. It's about Logan County, West Virginia, where I worked for a couple of weeks. And just so I wrote this, and I worked with this guy there. I forget his name. In the song, his name is McMaster. And he would drive. He grew up in West Virginia and lived in Ohio. And as we're driving around, he'd just be like, "Look at this place. Look at all this stuff. Look at what a mess it is here." And so I told his story in the song, where he lives outside of Logan, and he talks about, you know, the coal mines and how they wrecked the place, and the schoolgirls are in Logan. They're also pretty and so fine, but the life the mountain gives them could rob a pretty diamond of its shine. And how the women there, you know, just end up, you know, unemployed. And then at the end of the song, he says something about my parents lived in Logan County. That all my family's buried there, but I won't be. I'm not going to be buried there. So that's kind of I think that's that's a good one. I've written songs. I got a lot of songs about my sort of family. About my grandfather's mental illness. There's one about that, where I sort of tell his life story, and so I got a couple of those narrative songs.
So, can you give an example of a song that you wrote with a strong impressionistic aspect?
Those I'm not as good at, but well, actually, you know, one that I got some that are like very artsy, but there's one, the Night of the Living Lawn Ornaments, where a spaceship, I was walking down the sidewalk on a steamy summer night when a spaceship flew above me and it filled the sky with light. It blanketed the countryside in strange, peculiar rays that temporarily blinded me and left me in a daze. I wandered down the avenue and past the boulevard, then I passed out in a lawn chair sitting in somebody's yard. When I awoke, I witnessed such a sight. All the lawn ornaments had come to life. And so the wino on the lamppost got a job and gave up booze. The burro and the Mexican went back to Veracruz. The lions by the bird bath were running around the house while the goddess in the garden went out and bought a blouse. So it's just what would happen if all the lawn ornaments came to life. And the end of it is the jockey out front threw away his light the night the lawn.
Was there any real life inspiration for that?
There were two things. One was my sister lived up in Allentown, and I'd drive up there, and there's this lawn ornament factory, basically, where they sold lawn ornaments, but then they had rows and rows of them drying in the sun because they made them out of like plaster or concrete. So there'd be just rows of them. And at the same time in DC, there were Washington D.C. There was this group. I think it was, you know, black guys who were going around. They called themselves the Lawn Jockey Liberation Army, and they were going and
I remember. I think I remember.
They were sawing off the shadracks, you know, those kind of blackface, and sawing them off and kidnapping them. And I just had this notion of, what if it's not a liberation? What if the lawn jockeys are now freeing themselves? So somehow those two things combined, and I probably, you know, it's about an hour drive. A lot of times when I'm driving and not thinking about stuff, that's when the songs pop into my head. So yeah,
driving is wonderful inspiration. So, I mean, I've heard a lot of your songs, and I would say you use a lot of wordplay in your songs.
Yeah.
Do you want to give another example?
One of my favorite lines, and it's not a real popular song, but it's a song about a rag doll. And my grandmother had these rag dolls, and she was a rag, and it's a song about this rag doll from the perspective of my father when he was like 5 years old during the Depression. And so this rag doll tradition probably went back to, you know, when they couldn't get real dolls, so they just would make them. And it's, she was a rag doll, she was a rag doll, she was awesome, she was all sewn up in stitches, she had patches on her breeches, oh, let me be with my rag doll. And then there's another one which I really love, but I don't know that anybody else appreciates. And it's a song that's not terribly popular about. And it's one of my few love songs. Some people like the roses that line the garden walk, but I prefer a daisy upon a slender stalk. I listen to the bluebird along a winding lane. They may have 1,000 songs, but none are sweeter than your name, Darlene, Darlene. And I just like that, the bluebirds. They may have 1,000 songs, but none are sweeter than your name. There's a line from Shakespeare, and I don't know where it's from, and I heard it once and it stuck in my mind, but he says something about, if I were to say you were as bold as the sunshine, if I were to say you were as beautiful as the sunset, if I were to say your light shined out like the moon, that would be apt. He just left it at that. It's just like, of all these wonderful things, that would be apt. So, yeah.
So you've been in lots of different bands. Is there one song you would consider your hit song?
And that song is I'm Afraid of Everything, which I wrote when I turned 30, and I thought would be a horribly, horribly depressing song. Once I was afraid that my awkward youth would never end. Now I'm afraid that it has stopped. Once I was afraid of the things going on underneath my bed. Now I'm afraid of what's going on top. That was the AIDS crisis. I was afraid of some things I'm not anymore. Now I'm afraid of everything. And there's one line in it, which is, once I was afraid, once I was afraid that my parents would suddenly disappear. Now I'm afraid they will always be with me. And I thought this was like a sad song, and people break out laughing, especially when they hear that line. And I've actually thought about quite a bit, you know, why this song appeals to people, but I think it's empathy. And when I took writing courses and fiction courses, they're always like, you want to have characters who people can be empathetic with, even if it's Hannibal Lecter, this cannibal. But, you know, he just wants to, there's something about him where he wants to get back at certain people, but not everybody. And so people can go, yeah, I understand that, you know? And so I think it's got a nice hook. People can sing along with it, but it's also, I think, for kind of hit songs are, to me, that's the real thing. If people can relate to it.
So what critically panned song or musical group or style of music are you embarrassed to admit that you like? Is there anything you're embarrassed to admit?
Oh, yeah. Do you have any guesses? It was when we were both in high school. It was a girl group.
Yes, the Go-Go's.
The Go-Go's.
I saw the Go-Go's at Red Rocks in college.
Oh!
I was babysitting these 3 younger girls, and the parents gave me tickets to take them because the parents didn't want to take them to the concert.
Oh, great. So you went against your will.
No, I like the Go-Go's too.
Okay. But was it a good concert?
It was, I don't know if you know about Red Rocks. It's this beautiful natural outdoor amphitheater, and it was super, super hot. We were there all day. So by the time the concert came around, I was just exhausted. So.
Did they play well?
I have no recollection. I do remember that I was driving the parents' car, and I couldn't get it into reverse, and I put the accelerator on and hit another car.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Go-Go's, and I can't really claim that they have. I mean, I was talking to one guy, and he was like, "No, ABBA. If you listen to ABBA, they've got this great stuff in the background, and you know, and you could look at Barry Manilow, and he's got amazing chords. I've got nothing to say that the Go-Go's. I really can't provide that with any. But the odd thing was, when I was in Cuba, and you were with me, and we were in that bar, the restaurant next to the bar where Hemingway used to hang out, and they had this big TV screen.
Havana.
Yeah, VH1 was doing a tribute to the 80s, and so we're sitting in this quote-unquote communist country watching VH1 and the Ramones, and they had the Go-Go's on there, and I just thought, America has won the culture wars. They're listening to the Go-Go's.
It's quite an anachronistic experience because we're sitting in this like kind of classic old restaurant, and there's the VH1 with the 80s, and we're there in 2019.
Right. In old Havana. So yeah.
Yeah, Havana. Okay. So what popular song, music group, or genre do you not like?
I don't like, and I never have. And it's not just that I don't like it. I don't understand why people do like it. Usually I can understand why somebody likes something, but like Pink Floyd for me has always been like this slow, plodding, boring, stupid lyrics. And when people are like, oh, they're so you know, the guitar leads are so great, and I'm like, no, they're slow, and like the lyrics are like, the wall is just like, looks like it was written by a 7th grader. I just can't find anything positive to, and I can, you know, I can find positive things in a lot of music. You know, I can find something positive. Pink Floyd, just.
It's interesting. Pink Floyd, the engineer on Dark Side of the Moon. You're a trivia guy. Who was it?
I don't.
Alan Parsons?
Oh, it's Alan Parsons. And he had worked with the Beatles guy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
He was my inspiration because I originally wanted to be a recording engineer. I was
Really?
so impressed with how the Dark Side of the Moon was recorded.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, that when I've done recording, if you ever you've never recorded in a studio, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you have?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. It's great. I mean, it's like as much fun as you can have with your pants on, really. Recording in a studio is just so much fun.
I know it's your interview, but actually I went to a vocational school in high school my senior year in Denver, Colorado. This was 1980. It was the only high school in the U.S. at the time that in this vocational school where they had auto mechanics, culinary arts, all this, they had audio engineering.
Cool.
So half a day I would go to this vocational school, and I was this was pre-digital. So
right.
we would patch cords and everything. So,
oh,
yeah.
Wow.
So yes, I've been in recording studios.
Cool. What did you record musically recently?
Recently, just some of my own music.
Oh, yeah?
Covering songs with some other local musicians. Yeah.
Did you do it? I won't have you. Well, what studio did you go to?
It was called Working While Playing.
Oh.
It was a nonprofit music group that's not in existence anymore.
Oh.
So, where can we hear all of this wonderful music online, Jake?
Oh, that's actually, I was going to ask you that question. I've been very bad at posting my stuff online. Actually,
website?
Huh?
Do you have a website or a Facebook page?
You know, I should have prepared at least something. I got 3 CDs, which if you go to Amazon, you can probably, if you put Jake Michael, I've got a number of CDs, which I sort of forgot about.
You have a number of YouTubes also, don't you?
Yeah, on YouTube, if you search for Jake Michael on YouTube, you will probably get some of my music. I don't have a specific web page dedicated to music. I tried that. I sort of gave it a try of being a musician and stuff, and I have now given up. but I'm still posting stuff. And yeah, so if you do a Google search for Jake Michael and music, singer-songwriter, you will probably find some of my stuff.
There's another place to find some of your songs.
That's true. Go ahead.
What am I going to say? Your latest project, which was COVID-19 inspired, Mount Airy Afternoon. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Mount Airy Afternoon is a Facebook, it's a Zoom show. If you go to Facebook, you can see how to look at the show live. See, it's good that you're doing this because I
Mount Airy Afternoon Facebook fan page.
Right.
That has some of your songs on it that you perform on the show.
Right. And actually later today, I'm hoping to record some more of them. So yeah, some of the stuff that I never got formally recorded. Now the tables have turned. Where do we find your music, Melanie Jones? And what band do you play with?
I have a band which is on pause now because of COVID-19. It's called Melanie and the Lost Vaqueros.
Spelled with a V.
With a V. B como vaca.
Va.
Not B como burro. Melanie, it translates as Melanie and the Lost Cowboys. And we have a Facebook fan page, and we have a few of our songs on there. I have Jan Alba, who's an amazing flute woodwind player, Don Garfinkel, guitar player, original music, and Barry Bell on percussion, and Andy Wacko on upright bass with me on vocals, and occasionally percussion, maybe a little piano-ish. And so that's where you can find me. But also, both of us are on the Mount Airy. We are co-hosts on the Mount Airy Afternoon show every Saturday. And this show is really just lyrics with Jake Michael.
True.
But you needed to be interviewed. So today it's just lyrics with Melanie Jones.
Yes. And may I say, Melanie Jones, you are a good interviewer.
And you're an awesome musician.
Thank you. Thank you for helping me out.